It is exciting when you see whatever it is you take a picture of and your first print in the darkroom that comes up. It's magical. I was aware of not seeing photographs that somehow reflected the real space and pace and feel of LA. And when I started photographing, especially the automotive pictures, and then that led into the bus stop pictures, and that led into the lunch hour pictures. I think that what I was trying to look at was, for instance, the bus stop pictures. It's basically the same picture, but all over LA, but each one is different. But essentially it's the same picture, that perspective. And that was a way of capturing LA. You might say that endless kind of street that you actually can't, unless you walk, you can't experience that. If you're driving, it's a whole different thing. And I knew I was trying to photograph parts of LA that nobody else was looking at. LA downtown, before I took pictures, that's where I actually hung out with my cousins, friends. We'd go to all those movie theaters. We would just be on the street, just walking around, just hanging out. So when I first started to think about, taking pictures, where would I go? Downtown is a place I knew. Before I got to know the history of street photography and whoever those photographers were, from Robert Frank to anybody, I was really drawn to downtown LA because I knew it. I felt that that's a place I wanted to try to work in, capture, even though I didn't know what those pictures were going to be. That's where I started. From my own background, from that experience as a kid growing up there, LA's changed. Back then, you might say it was basically it was very quiet compared to what it is now. All the Broadway department stores were open. It was quite alive, actually. And that's when I was photographing. It's now a completely different place now. Long Beach was the first place I went to photograph when I got back and thinking about Weston. So that's because of growing up, and that's actually the first beach I actually used to hang out, go with my parents as a kid. So that started there, but then I went to Santa Monica, Venice. There's actually a couple of pictures made in Jones Beach, New York as well. So it's 1969/70 beach pictures. Weston's photographs of nudes on the sand, it really was an inspiration. So I was thinking of Weston when I started making those pictures, and just because of the way the sand reproduces. But I wanted to photograph, or I ended up photographing mostly single people on the beach, just laying down, looking down. I always thought of it as a dance, because I was photographing as I was moving through that. It wasn't like stopping. My camera's in my hand, I'm walking, and then my camera comes up to my face. With the Leica, you can do that very quickly, photograph something and then just keep moving. So it's one movement or a series of movements, always move in a very fluid way. And that's a very hard surface, and obviously the people can seem, let's say they're having their private moment. But I also thought that I was trying to photograph things in a very straightforward, but you might say, taking a really hard look at it, versus other photographers that may have been photographing in cities, which was a much softer approach, you might say. Mine was not. I think of them as becoming much more focused and much more formal, and in a very hard, straightforward way of looking at it. They're more confrontational, But sometimes in that confrontation, people are aware that I'm taking the pictures, and other times they're not aware that I'm taking the pictures. I disappeared. They're both two different ways of working, but I like both of them. Rodeo Drive, those color photographs, different than the black and white. Maybe even the color is probably closer. I'm actually physically closer to people, which I liked, trying to make pictures that way because of the challenge. The people, whether it's black and white, a younger person or an older person, what interests me is that you might say they're so ordinary, basically very ordinary people, but I didn't want, the pictures aren't ordinary. And I think I could say the same thing for a lot of my work, that it doesn't even have people in them. It's whatever I'm photographing is so ordinary, but the pictures aren't. I started thinking about, well, LA, the automobile has a huge impact, and I started making these photographs, which I call automotive landscapes. And that started this other way of looking at LA, which meant that I could actually photograph things in LA that are really about LA. I could have continued making more street photographs in downtown LA, but I wanted to change. To me, it was again discovering and experiencing LA in a different way, but now actually photographing it as well, but personally just to look at other places in LA that I had never been to. People might say it's a gritty or depressing place, but to make a picture that's, yes, it's all that, but isn't that a really interesting picture of that? And that's what always drives me, is that saying, does the picture really work? And is it really something that forces people to say, gee, I really like that picture, but look at what I'm looking at. And why do I feel that way? Well, you're looking at something I looked at and felt that way. And if you can feel that way, then I think I was successful. Angeles National Forest has places that are designated where people will go on target practice. And that really fascinated me in terms of what they were taking out there, where you're supposed to take a real target, put it up, and then when you finish, take it away. Well, people don't do that. They just go crazy. They take things out there to see what happens when you shoot it, whether it's a television, whatever it is, paint cans, anything. And so I started photographing all that. Well, that led into something, the homeless work, that led into something else. I never went back to photographing people, but it wasn't a conscious decision to stop photographing people. It just happened. Everybody's photographing portraits, black and white portraits of homeless people. And I saw a lot of that. I said, but nobody's photographing the evidence of homelessness here in LA. Plus, I would call them landscapes. And I did call them landscapes for the homeless. It's their landscape. It's my gift to them, so to speak. The homeless work for me was very rich work, to do, because nobody was looking at it that way. And looking at it meaning as an artist, it hasn't been revealed, so to speak, that way, in a very serious way, and also in a very formal way. Color and the evidence of homelessness, not the people themselves, but to try to evoke, what is it really like, living there, sleeping there, eating there, whatever it was, in these places. Homeless people, poor people, they're just like they're at the very bottom, and there's always a bottom, but we don't like to think about it, and we don't like to see it. And actually now it's gotten so bad that people, even though it's all around us, people actually don't see it anymore. The Forever Pictures was overlapping years later of the homeless pictures, because they're all real homeless sites. And the challenge was, when I started that, I wanted to look out. I'm in those places. I'm actually looking at what somebody would actually see from that position, that point. So it's their point of view. Some of them are very abstract, very minimal. I love the square format, it's so formal. But they're real places, and a real place that somebody actually saw, was sleeping there, sitting there, and I'm in that position now. So you might say they're just these details, more now than the other work was. Out in the desert, discarded, another body of work, and these photographs that I made, you don't know what's out there. I've never been out to these places before. So to me, what's driving it is that it's new for me. It's all new territory. And you don't know what you're going to find. But then you find something, and just out of nowhere, it's there. And it's so incredible that you actually can make a picture at that moment. And it won't be repeated. The cover of my book, that actual cover, and that picture, that light is falling fast. I just said, oh, the light's falling, I better take this quickly, very quickly, take that picture, and then left. Ended up being the cover of the book, and it's a very powerful picture, I really like it. But at the moment, I just have to take this picture and keep moving. So it is that and other pictures are very minimal, but you think about what that interior is of a house that never was, could have been, and now it's just like gone. This like American dream of owning a house, it's an illusion now for a lot of people. which is a reality. People can't afford to buy a house. I knew the LA River, so it brought back all that memory. As a kid, I played in the LA River a lot with my cousins everywhere, even in the tunnels and drainage. So I started photographing that. But I also thought of it as nobody sees the LA River, basically, if you're driving around, because it's there. And you think of the LA River, well, there's nothing there. It's just concrete. So that to me, it was a challenge of saying, well, you have to walk. And I've walked the whole LA River a number of times to keep finding things to photograph. And that's why I titled it Everything. Everything that ends up in the LA River that's washed up there. And that's how that started. Photographing, interiors. That started in Rome. When I got to Rome, I didn't want to photograph the classic kind of ruins of Rome, right? But since I've never really been to Rome, I want to photograph something that is not what would be typical of Rome. And then I started finding these buildings and people would point them out to me. And all of a sudden you find out that there were a lot of these buildings that were built in the 80s and they were never finished. I guess you'd say they were the new ruins of Rome. And then when I came back here, I did photograph other, like these buildings in Baltimore, these buildings in Oakland, I ended up photographing. And now the last pictures of these, you might say, abandoned subdivisions outside the desert. So there are all these kinds of interiors. Even now, particularly with color, it's this kind of soft reflected light that and very even light for a lot of different subjects that I'm really drawn to. It's something that it kind of comes up again and again in certain pictures. You don't stop and say, well, that's the kind of light I like. It's just whatever it is at that moment, whatever the subject you're photographing, it just hits you. I'm thinking about things that haven't been expressed somehow through photography, still photographs, art, whatever that experience is, let's express it. So what is it that hasn't been expressed in art that we can try to do? And so I say that was kind of a driving thing. It's been in the back of my mind for a number of years. I like the way I've been working in a very, very fluid way and for all this time now. And it's very gratifying because it makes me feel that I still have a lot of work to do.